Howdy, this here's Professor U.D. Guru. I recall as a child I used to actually read Consumer Reports and TV Guide. We had Life and Time magazines, but once I'd scoured them for dirty pictures like in the timeless classic issue of Life where they featured topless bathing suits, for actual reading matter I preferred TV Guide so I'd never miss any of my favorite shows or my favorite celebrities like Herman Munster, Tiny Tim, Dr. Smith, and Lost in Space. I gave up TV when I was about 13 because I had hobbies and things on my mind and no time to watch all the commercials. I found the commercials infinitely annoying because they were obviously dishonest. But I never gave up movies because that's one of the few times I got to eat candy. I remember when snacks in the theater cost only a little more than they should instead of many times more. And I was never much for eating popcorn in the theater. Who needs popcorn when there's Juji Fruits, Dots, Junior Mints, for Christ's sake? Popcorn just dilutes the sugar. I remember reading an article in TV Guide which informed me that one day we'd all be able to watch any movie we wanted at home on our TVs by renting it. I found this hard to believe, but incredibly exciting. One of my hobbies back then was haunting bookstores and libraries. But this pursuit came with a complication. I would get so happy the moment I smelled books that I would have to run to the bathroom. This wasn't a tendency. It was 100% every single time. It got to where if I entered a library, I just head for the stalls, not the study carrels. The little boys' room had to be my very first stop. A bookstore or library in those days was the best laxative on earth. And when the big day, the birth of the VCR, had come and gone and video rental stores were already taken for granted, I noticed a new tendency. Instead of bookstores and libraries having a laxative effect on me, video rental stores now had that effect. I was addicted to watching movies after a hard day at work, never used my TV for anything else. But unlike books, which I could no longer afford to buy, I could afford to rent movies. But I could not afford to enter a video store that had no public restroom. This didn't happen the first time I walked into a video store. I had to grow into it. This wasn't a problem at first. Every store in America had a restroom for employees, and most of them were willing to share theirs with a suave, debonair fellow like me. But there was this creeping crud crawling across our great nation, and I was living in one of the places hit earliest and hardest by this slime, a rich suburb of Portland, Oregon, wherein I inhabited the local ghetto, which was 3 blocks long and has by now been turned into an industrial park. The nature of the aforementioned rolling slime was that the customer was no longer always right in America. The customer was a nuisance for the entitled customer service representative to dispose of as quickly as possible. We are the corporation now. We hire cleaning services. Cleaning restrooms is no longer our concern. We are better than that. We have liberated ourselves from serving the public. Hear us roar. And so it came to pass, one fateful evening, that I was in a Blockbuster video and had to ask the little girl that was running the place where the restroom was, because all Blockbuster videos used to have restrooms, but I couldn't find theirs. In a loud voice meant to make her sound powerful while entertaining the other customers of the store, she asked me if I really had to go really bad, the way you'd talk to a 4-year-old, because generally, as she so helpfully explained, the restroom was off limits to customers. Well, I was not going to stand there in front of all these people explaining to this arrogant, overgrown teenager that my shorts were going to be brown if she didn't stand down. So I ran to my car and drove home, and later that evening is when I got online and discovered Netflix. This was back when they'd mail you a DVD and you could return it whenever you wanted. But back to that fateful night in 2004, the last time I ever entered a Blockbuster video store. When I finished doing my business in my restroom at home, I didn't flush it down right away. I got my phone and called Blockbuster. And when I had that girl on the phone, I held the phone above the water level in the toilet and let her listen to the flushing sound as a reward for her being so amazing at her job of disposing of customers. Of course, this act of silliness, which accomplished nothing, was long before phones had cameras in them, which I didn't mind. You got to draw the line somewhere. Not that I voluntarily use a smartphone even now, even though I have one somewhere, because, you got to draw the line somewhere. And my dogs think I already get too much screen time. Hey, guess what else? I personally know 3 people in the movie industry, but none of them are speaking to me, and it makes me so sad. The most interesting example is my best friend from junior high school, who had muscular dystrophy and weighed 85 pounds fully dressed. He could walk and he tried to run because he was always part of the group and often the ringleader. He saved his school lunch money for years and used it to buy a piece of land in the desert where he could stage bottle rocket wars amongst his friends. No doubt the parents didn't know about the bottle rocket part. This guy was supposed to not live past the age of 21, but what do doctors know? He went to architecture school and used his credentials to create a set design career for himself, starting in the Live Theater of New York City and quickly moving up the pay scale to Hollywood. He ended up with a great career as an art director, working on many of the movies you and I have seen. When we were 19, he was just my roommate. Turns out that one day, when I was too young and stupid to realize he was going to retire a multimillionaire someday, I wasn't very nice to him. So I haven't seen him in about 49 years. I'll fix the lights tomorrow. I got it figured out, though. Look, no more glare in the glasses. How'd I do it? Well, I watched like 35 YouTube videos on how to keep the glare from showing up in your glasses. None of it worked because you can't move your head around. And see, I can move my head around. This is a fix that I invented all by myself. And I'm going to tell you the secret because you're my friend. This is what you do. You have a white ceiling. You point your lights directly at the ceiling. Only problem is you need a pretty bright light. I can go to town tomorrow and get a brighter light. Anyway, in regards to my friend, our personalities weren't really compatible. I was barely aware that he was taking care of me, not the other way around. Let's just say his parents believed in discipline and societal advancement, while my parents believed the world was too scary to participate in. I was lucky to have this go-getter for a friend. But enough about me. The most obvious reason why today's movies suck. The number of movies made in the U.S. in the 1930s was almost 10,000. In the 1940s, almost 8,000. It went down because of World War II. Not as many movies were being made. Then in the 1950s, he went down again to about 5,500. Went down again because of TV. In the 1960s, it went down again because of TV, down to about 4,300. Then in the 1970s, it went up to almost 6,000 because of Betamax and VHS tapes. And then in the 1980s, it went up to almost 8,000 because of video rental stores. In the 1990s, it went up to over 11,000 because of the McDonaldization of video rental stores such as Blockbuster and other corporations. And then from 2000 to 2007, there was 25,000 movies made. Netflix replaced video rental stores. And then comes streaming, which I don't know what that is because I'm over 60 and I don't have to learn any new words. After that, it's impossible to count exactly how many movies are being made because there's so many. Now, there are many streaming services online making their own movies, like Netflix making their own movies, etc. There's only 2 of these services available where I live in the Philippines. Netflix and YouTube has some paid movies. The number of movies being made means that just because of the statistics, it's a numbers game. There will be more predictable, boring formula scripts being written. The size of the industry, and the industry must be populated by human beings still. In this age of automation, we still need actual people involved. The size of the industry lowers the bar in every sector of the industry, from directors to script writers. When tens of thousands of movies are being made per year, the number of creative geniuses available to do the work of movie making is not going to increase proportionately to accommodate this frenzy of profit-oriented so-called art. That is the most obvious reason why today's movies suck. But here are more specific complaints that I have about what exactly makes so many of these movies unwatchable. Actors who are professional pretenders are producing, directing, and writing more of their own content. I say content because when there's so much fluff to wade through in the ongoing search for watchable movies, it's not worth more than a generic grunt of description the way we talk about YouTube videos. Just content. What are actors? They're professional pretenders. You put a professional pretender in the role of director or producer or screenwriter, you might not get the results you need. Oftentimes, it's not a big problem that actors are producing and directing their own movies. But the more involved an actor is with the foundation of the story itself, the more likely it is that the story will not be a story, but a labor of self-love from a professional pretender whose main motivation in life is to be noticed while pretending to be something worth noticing. I got nothing against actors, I'm just stating the facts of life. Actors might be artists of sorts, at least some of them, but being an artist of sorts does not make you a writer. When actors are too involved with the portrayal of themselves in a movie, the movie turns into a drool fest of vanity. A multimillionaire Hollywood icon is not necessarily qualified to write a more meaty, compelling story than a no-name writer who has to rely on his ability to sell a story. A rich actor can just plug his vanity piece into a fountain of money and instant movie. Unwatchable, multi-million-dollar horse hockey. A related phenomenon is when a famous author writes his own movie adaptation. The best example of this is Stephen King, who became so addicted to his own horse hockey that he started pumping out miniseries scripts so his bloated novels could be presented in full, instead of chopped down to the parts that anyone might actually want to see on a screen. Take The Shining, for example. A perfectly scary movie, destined to become a classic, was remade by the book's author into a terrible miniseries with Mr. King, of course, playing a cameo role, apparently imagining himself to be the next Alfred Hitchcock. But that was a long time ago, when today's movie watchers had yet to grace us with their presence, which I guess makes them the unborn up till fairly recently. But anyhow, what about the cinematic offerings of today? In spite of the fact that Hollywood demonstrated during the 2024 election that its celebrity talent has become ossified, brain-dead, or even downright zombified somewhere along the line, I feel that the biggest problem is not the celebrities, the directors, or the producers. The core of a story is the story, and I can't help but blame the writers for the tsunami of swill that us movie lovers are currently being bombarded with. Of course, the screenwriter generally has no control over how the DEI fantasies of lib-triffid Hollywood is going to ruin a good story, but horse hockey rolls downhill, and one has to assume that the writers of today are actually originating a generous quantity of horse hockey all on their lonesome. So here are some apparent defects of story which abound in the movies of today, and in how stories, or what passes for stories, are being presented with the application of many billions of misspent dollars. Special effects are used to dazzle in place of story. Every movie is now essentially a 3D cartoon. But visual dazzlement isn't enough to make up for empty stories and formula plots. You can only watch so many impossible things being done effortlessly by movie heroes before you become jaded and stop finding it interesting. Speaking of impossible things, something deep inside me tends to whisper in my ear during today's overly choreographed impossible fight scenes that one guy, no matter how miraculously well trained he is, can rarely subdue 3 opponents, much less 30. We crave entertainment, but a big part of story crafting is that the story must be believable in order to hold the interest of sophisticated adults like you and me who are quickly bored by horse hockey. The believability factor doesn't rule out fantasy or science fiction at all. All movies are fantasy in a sense, including most so-called true stories. But if a story is about impossible-seeming things like magic or future technology, the believability factor in crafting relatable circumstances to navigate in the story is more important, not less. Unfortunately, the screenwriters of today are stuck on trying to inject believability into stories by making characters weak, thus more human. With air quotes around more human. This is a good idea, but you're supposed to draw the line somewhere. And currently, the industry is so addicted to dark moods, barely covering the underlying weakness and emotionalism of the character that, well, I struggle to adequately express my disdain for the current deification of self-pity as a virtue. There's nothing to appreciate about large doses of unrestrained weakness, not even in comedy. Were the Three Stooges weak? Not particularly. Is cringe comedy funny? Not at all. Can a woman defeat 50 men in a fight? Of course not. It's as boring as 4th grade history class because there's nothing to believe in. Speaking of women heroes, and I know you all wanted me to speak on this topic, so I let you twist my arm. Here we go. The female hero has not only taken over the action genre, but the whole industry. Do an experiment. Get on Netflix and try to find a movie where the main character is a man. You'll find plenty. Well, not plenty, but you'll find a few. However, if you watch the movies where the main character is a man, he will generally be a bad man, a weak man, a gangster, an idiot, a clown who isn't funny, a strong man who has no conscience, and the like. But our female heroes are now inherently invincible, and this must not be questioned. Misogynists go to hell, you know. So many movies are all about women beating the odds that the notion of women beating the odds has been diluted and made ordinary. I, who once called himself a feminist man, well, maybe for one day, I've come to find feminism tiresome and melodramatic, a playground for attention-seeking superior victims in a society where women already have equal rights. Folks who celebrate victimhood and demonize success are not revolutionaries. They're whiners. I don't despise women, at least not more than I despise men. And there's nothing wrong with a story about a woman beating the odds. That's what stories are supposed to be about. The problem is that all these feminist stories are preaching at me. They aren't beating the odds because they did the work and therefore beat the odds. They're beating the odds because they're female. So the industry is losing favor like a hobo shedding cooties on a soapbox. The crowd is dispersing, and if Hollywood doesn't get a grip on some kind of balanced perspective of the world, there will be nothing left of the movie industry but a bunch of drunk, drug-addled, cosmetically altered has-beens living off of their investments. There is absolutely nothing wrong with strong women. Strong women constitute exactly 50% of the reason why the human race has been such a success. This is so true that I can't imagine anyone arguing against it. But did Dorothy win and get herself and Toto back to Kansas because she was a girl? Or even in spite of being a girl? No. She won the fight and got back to Kansas because she did the right things, made the right friends, and didn't believe the horse hockey of the psychos in charge. Once upon a time, we barely noticed the gender of the story's hero because gender wasn't being shoved down our throats. What about the men in The Wizard of Oz? Every one of them is flawed, but comically so. In the end, it is demonstrated by the comically flawed anti-hero wizard, who turns out to be a sweet and well-meaning snake oil salesman, that the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion are as brave, smart, and compassionate as they had supposed themselves not to be. If you'd read the books, you'd know that the Scarecrow, Tin Woodman, and Cowardly Lion became the new rulers of Oz when Dorothy and the Wizard went back to Kansas. They were not being rescued by a female, nor was their being male any part of the story or the moral of the story. Movies used to be gender neutral, and now that the libtriffids can't stop talking about gender, they are creating misogyny, apparently because they don't like equality, the kind of equality that has grown up organically due to the liberation movements of my generation. Libtards still need something to complain about. So they're inventing non-existent minorities to defend. The men in today's movies are not comically flawed, but inherently incapable. They are innately useless, but comical only superficially. Because when men are pointless, it isn't actually funny. The real culprit here is cringe humor. This nasty replacement for actual humor crept into entertainment at the same pace with which weakness crept into our national character. For example, there's this horrendous trend in so-called comedy which takes the form of characters hesitating self-consciously over their lines while the consumers of this supposed entertainment cringe on their sofas and choke on their popcorn. Men acting cutely incompetent to get attention is not comedy nor entertainment. It's slapstick without the action. And a movie without action is just hot air. So what is the camera even needed for? I'm not going to try and boil comedy down to a few lines, because it's a complex phenomenon evidenced when something bubbles up involuntarily from deep inside you and your craft beer squirts out your nose. In fact, I think it would be wrong to define and analyze comedy too much, like showing how a magic trick is done. It should be taboo to explain comedy to anyone who doesn't already understand it a little bit, and it's pointless to explain it to someone who doesn't at least want to have a sense of humor. A good example of cringy dialogue that's become a habit in Hollywood and TV is the series Superstore, which was good, it was watchable, it has some good characters and some good moments. But there were three things wrong with it. The three main characters. The Latina woman was the main character and the only normal person in the show. There's nothing wrong with that, except it's now the case in maybe 80% of TV shows and movies. The strong and smart female leader saves the stupids from themselves. Her character was preaching ideology a bit too much, but it could have been worse. She was watchable, but it's too bad she kept getting fatter and fatter as the series wore on. Each character should be allotted only so much of the screen. I'm not hating on fat people. That comment was what we in the movie making business used to call a joke. In fact, the chunky blonde assistant manager was consistently the funniest character in the show by far. The male lead in Superstore, on the other hand, was the epitome of a weak man whose only comedic contribution to the story was cringe humor, with air quotes around the word humor. I kept on wishing the writers would make him the serial killer who was leaving human hands all over the place so he could be carted off to prison. I couldn't stand that guy, not one little bit, especially as a romantic lead. Nothing he said or did ever gave me a big fat involuntary belly laugh. Cringe humor doesn't do that to you. It doesn't even make you groan. It just makes you cringe and swear under your breath. Can anyone in the film industry tell the difference between cringing and laughing? The third main character was the store manager, Glenn, whose weakness could have been comical if it was not overdone and blasted at us by a loud, bizarrely inappropriate voice so unpleasant that it diluted the comedy and made us not believe that such a person would ever be put in charge of a big box store. I suppose stranger things have happened, but like I said, in fantasy, the writer has to work double time to make the story believable, thus relatable, thus watchable. For example, compare Leslie Nielsen in Naked Gun. The voice made the character. Glenn in Superstore should have tried harder to come up with a voice that we would actually want to laugh at. I watched Superstore from start to finish, in spite of both male leads being almost too cringy to bear. And I give it a B, but I would have liked to have given it an A. About drama. I used to prefer it. But I also used to go to Cinema 21 in Clinton Street Theater in Portland to see artsy-fartsy films and wallow in foreign film intellectualism, so I can't say I've always had such good taste as what I have now. What is a foreign film or artsy-fartsy intellectual film? In those days, it was a movie guaranteed to be about nothing, like My Dinner with Andre, which flattered the intellectual's ego, or lack thereof, because only a smart person would struggle so hard to find value in hot air. But movies like this did not entertain with anything like a story. I think this type of intellectualistic flattery of the moviegoer has up and gone somewhere, but maybe it's I who've up and gone somewhere since I moved to the Philippines 20 years ago. And Netflix doesn't bother trying to get Filipinos to watch movies about absolutely nothing. But they come pretty close. Another reason for the demise of the intellectualistic movie about nothing might be that the moviegoers, who used to adore difficult, obtuse entertainment, are now soccer grandparents and have been replaced in the art theaters, if there are any still, by people who are always stoned on lethally potent legal marijuana and or staring at smartphones. It's hard enough to stay awake without trying to watch plotless movies. But back to present time. What is drama? Drama died, I happen to notice, once upon a time when Robin Williams, who should have stuck to comedy, spent way too long in an overly long movie twitching his jaw, silently overcome with emotion, or self-pity, or depression, because he could not handle the circumstances that fate had brought him in the story. By the way, the main character's troubles should be brought upon himself, because if fate can be blamed for the story's plot, the character is a victim of circumstance, and the plot is not interesting except to emotionalistic, knee-jerk supporters of the bottom dog. Thus, drama is dumbed down to appeal only to the emotionally stupid. Drama died again all 3 times I tried to watch Twilight and couldn't get through the first 5 minutes, because I was apparently expected to take teen angst seriously as a vehicle for vampiric immortality. Where I come from, emotionalistic, dour, gloomy, angst-ridden, pity-pot posers are the first to die, not celebrated, not worth any attention at all, and neither believable as immortal monsters nor interesting as pretty boy celebrity whiners sucking out each other's precious bodily fluids. The current tendency to mistake self-pitying antisocial men for romantically suffering wounded heroes is one of the most regrettable ever body slams to the movie-watching public. I'd rather watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure twice a day for a year than to endure 5 minutes of another vampire movie or superhero movie or sequel to something that wasn't very good the first time around or remake of anything, good or bad. And good God Almighty, please, Lord, make them stop pooping out assassins and hitmen and hitwomen as movie heroes, or I swear I will swear off movies altogether. I'm so tired of glorified drug lords and serial killers and unbelievably intelligent criminal masterminds and drunkard cops and lovable assassins and every other villain is a Russian. I'm in danger of canceling my Netflix account altogether, even though in the Philippines, Netflix can only get away with charging $4.50 a month. Unfortunately, that's all it's worth. In order to try and get to the end of this rant before next Tuesday, let me summarize my last 4 points, which I saved for last because they're some of my most amazing insights. After that, I'll shower upon you 2 bonus gripes. Last point number 1. No society is 25% gay, and no society consists of 40% mixed marriages. These imbalances in casting are not odious, not offensive, not bad, immoral, or wrong in any way at all. Just kidding. They're in bad taste and condescendingly disrespectful to the audience because the viewing audience didn't turn on a movie in order to be preached at. Believe it or not, entertaining a paying audience and shoving ideology down their throats are not the same thing. Last point number 2. Having gone to the trouble of writing a screenplay once myself, which I was not able to do successfully without researching the topic first, I can testify that watching a movie whose plot is communicated by dialogue instead of action is a confusing and unsatisfying experience. Before I did the research and proved to myself that I could write my very own movie script, I probably still wouldn't have liked a dialogue-driven story. But now that it's official, I literally can't like a dialogue-driven story. The hardest part of writing a screenplay, and therefore the easiest task to cheat on if you're lousy at it, is to show, not tell. If a movie starts with narration, that's a red flag. That's even worse than driving the story with dialogue. A good screenwriter either knows instinctively or else learns the hard way to drive the story with action. I'm not talking about John Wick action. I'm talking about a character looking out the window and seeing something with 3 legs out in the garden instead of character A having to explain to character B that there's something 3-legged out in the garden. Now that you've learned that a dialogue-driven plot is confusing, unentertaining, unengrossing, and unlikable, you'll curse me next time you're on Netflix and can't find a flick worth watching because the characters won't shut up and do something. You'll mutter to yourself, "Dang that Professor UD Guru, I'd be better off not knowing what's wrong with this stupid movie." Last point number 3. Unhappy endings. If I want unhappy endings, I'll watch news reruns from the Obama-Biden era. When I stare at a screen for an hour or 2, and then everything turns out badly for the pretend people, I feel that everything has turned out badly for me also. Unhappy endings reward my stupidity for sitting there for an hour or 2 instead of turning the movie off after 5 minutes. Last point number 4. No good guys. A movie where the bad guy is evil and the good guy is only very, very bad See my point about unhappy endings above. If I don't like someone in the movie, I don't care what happens. This type of movie is so bad, I want them all to die, the sooner the better. Make it stop is the wrong way to feel about entertainment. Bonus gripe number 1. Stories like Dune, where you are lost from scene 1 unless you've already read the book. If the book is as boring as the movie, well, okay, maybe it was. I tried to read Dune several times. In fact, I think I preferred the David Lynch movie to the later remakes because although it sucked too, since it was Dune, at least it was a David Lynch movie. Bonus gripe number 2. Dystopian epics, including the ones where teenagers save the world. Hunger Games was pretty good, though the amazing surprise shock ending was predictable, and to its credit it turned me on to Jennifer Lawrence, who I happen to like because I've liked almost every movie I've seen her in. I truly appreciate a Hollywood celebrity who knows how to choose a good script. Maze Runner wasn't too bad. Actually, surprisingly good for a zombie movie. What's lacking from the average end of civilization movie is the kind of black humor that you saw long ago in Little Murders by Buck Henry, directed by Alan Arkin and starring Elliot Gould. Dystopia needs story and characterization too, not just amazing costumes, moody actors, and incredible set design. And it could even use a sense of humor. Smoking cities and rivers of rot and piles of filth everywhere are not enough to justify the cost of producing and marketing a movie. Escape from New York was a good dystopian movie. And at the risk of repeating myself again, a main character who displays morose, moody, brooding behavior is not a wounded hero. He is a symptom. Living in a dystopian future is no excuse for self-pity posing as entertainment. When it comes right down to it, the end of the world is kind of an important matter. The topic should not be taken up lightly, and should not be taken up at all by unartistic corporate sleazemongers who just want to cash in on the way today's libtriffid class aches to see civilization crash and burn. I've seen enough dystopia for now, and I can only hope that we've seen the best it has to offer, and that we're ready to move on. This is Professor UD Guru. Thanks for showing up. Bye-bye.